Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Speaking Nerds channel. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today. I'm your host, Maya.
And I'm John. This is the place where we teach you authentic, natural English, not the rigid, confusing grammar from textbooks, but the smooth, expressive language that real people use when they're making requests, expressing preferences, and navigating everyday conversations with grace and politeness.
Exactly. And if you want to master one of the most powerful words in English, a word that can make you sound instantly more polite, more sophisticated, and more like a native speaker, we need your support right now. Please hit that like button and subscribe to English Speaking Nerds. Your subscription means the world to us and helps us create more content that truly transforms your English skills.
We genuinely appreciate each and every one of you. We love seeing your comments and learning about which grammar topics confuse you most. Now, today, we're diving into something really special, a word that appears in almost every conversation, but that many English learners struggle to use naturally. We're talking about how to use would in everyday English.
How to use would in everyday conversation. This is such a valuable skill because would is more than just a grammar word. It's a tool for politeness, a way to express imagination, a method for softening statements, and a key to sounding truly fluent. Being able to use would naturally helps you navigate professional situations, make polite requests, express preferences gracefully, and connect with native speakers on their level.
Absolutely. And here's something fascinating, and please stay with us because we're going to reveal this later in the video. There's one way that native speakers use would that textbooks almost never teach, but it's the secret to sounding incredibly polite and professional in any situation. We'll show you exactly what it is and how to use it naturally.
And that's just the beginning of what you'll learn today. We're going to cover how to use would for polite requests, how to express preferences and desires, how to talk about imaginary situations, how to describe past habits, how to make your opinions sound softer and more diplomatic, how to give advice without seeming pushy, and so much more. Plus, we have a special technique at the end that will help you choose between would, could, and should correctly every single time.
So let's jump right in. Maya, why is it so important to know how to use would in English?
Oh, such a great question. Would is important because it's what I call a politeness power word. In English-speaking cultures, being direct can sometimes sound rude or aggressive. Would allows you to express what you want, what you think, or what you need while maintaining respect and giving others the freedom to say no. It's the difference between sounding demanding and sounding diplomatic.
Yes, and there's something I call the distance principle that explains how would works.
The distance principle. Tell everyone what that means.
The distance principle is the idea that would creates psychological distance or space between you and what you're saying. Instead of stating something directly and forcefully, you create a buffer, a cushion of politeness. For example, I want coffee is direct and can sound demanding. I would like coffee creates distance, makes it softer, more polite. This distance is the key to understanding all the uses of would.
Perfect explanation. And mastering would involves what I call the formality scale.
The formality scale. What does that mean?
The formality scale is understanding that would sits at a specific level of politeness, more formal than simple present tense, but less formal than very elaborate phrases. It's the sweet spot for most professional and polite situations. Can you help me? Is casual. Would you be able to help me is polite and professional. I would be most grateful if you could provide assistance is very formal. Would hits that perfect middle ground.
Excellent. And using would naturally follows what I call the contraction rule.
The contraction rule? That sounds important.
The contraction rule is simple but crucial. In spoken English, native speakers almost always contract would to d. I would like becomes I'd like. She would prefer becomes she'd prefer. We would love becomes we'd love. If you always say the full word would, you'll sound stiff and unnatural. The contraction makes you sound fluent and relaxed.
Wonderful. And many English learners face what I call the confusion trio.
The confusion trio? Explain that.
The confusion trio is when learners mix up would, could, and should because they all look similar and all end in ud, but they have completely different meanings. Would is about hypotheticals and politeness. Could is about possibility and ability. Should is about obligation and advice. For example, I would go if something were true. I could go, I have the ability. I should go, I have the obligation. That distinction is crucial.
That's so important. And remember that special use of would we mentioned? Here it is. Native speakers use would to soften their opinions and make them sound less aggressive. Instead of saying, "you're wrong," they say, "I would say that's not quite accurate." Instead of, "that's a bad idea," they say, "I wouldn't recommend that approach." This one technique instantly makes you sound more professional and emotionally intelligent.
Perfect clarification. Now let's talk about the most common use of would, making polite requests. What are the different ways to ask for things politely?
For basic polite requests, you can say, "Would you help me? Would you pass the salt? Would you mind closing the door? Would it be possible to reschedule? Would you be able to send me that file?" Each of these is more polite than using can or the imperative.
Those show great variety. Can you explain the difference in tone?
Sure, compare these. Help me is a command. It can sound rude. Can you help me is casual and direct, fine with friends. Could you help me is more polite, good for acquaintances. Would you help me is polite and professional, perfect for work. Would you mind helping me is very polite, shows extra respect. Each level adds more politeness.
What about when you're offering something to someone? How do you use would in offers?
For offers, you typically use would you like. For example, would you like some coffee? Would you like to sit down? Would you like me to help you with that? Would you care for some tea? More formal. These are all more polite than do you want coffee, which can sound too direct.
Can you give real examples in context?
Of course. Imagine you're at someone's home. Would you like something to drink? I have coffee, tea, or juice. At a meeting, would you like to go first or should I present my ideas? At a restaurant, would you care for dessert this evening? The context determines the exact phrasing, but would always adds politeness.
What about expressing your own wants and preferences? How do you use would for that?
For expressing preferences politely, you say, I would like, I would love, I would prefer, I'd rather. For example, I would like the chicken, please, at a restaurant. I'd love to join you, accepting an invitation. I would prefer to meet in the morning, stating a preference. I'd rather stay home tonight, expressing a stronger preference.
Can you explain the difference between these expressions? Absolutely. I would like is neutral and polite, standard for requests. I would love shows enthusiasm, warmer and more personal. I would prefer indicates a choice between options, slightly formal. I'd rather expresses a stronger preference, sometimes implying you don't want the alternative. For example, I'd like coffee is neutral. I'd love coffee shows you really want it. I'd prefer coffee to tea shows comparison. I'd rather have coffee suggests you really don't want the alternative. Perfect. Now let's talk about hypothetical situations, imaginary scenarios. How do you use would to talk about things that aren't real or aren't happening? This is the classic conditional use. The structure is if plus past tense, would plus base verb. For example, if I had money, I would travel the world. If she knew the truth, she would be angry. If we lived closer, we would visit more often. If it wasn't raining, I would go for a walk. Can you break down why this structure works? Sure, the if clause describes an unreal or hypothetical condition, something that isn't true right now. We use past tense, had, knew, lived, wasn't, to show it's not real. This is called the unreal past. Then would shows the imaginary result. So, if I had money, but I don't, I would travel, but I can't. The would signals that we're in the imaginary world, not reality. Can you talk about desires and wishes? How do you express what you want but might not be able to have? You use phrases like, I would love to, I would like to, I'd give anything to, I would do anything to. For example, I would love to learn piano, but I don't have time. I'd like to visit Japan someday. I'd give anything to see her again. I would do anything to change what happened. These express strong desires with a sense that they might not happen. Those are very expressive. Now let's discuss past habits. How do you use would to talk about things you used to do repeatedly? For past habits, you describe repeated actions in the past that don't happen anymore. For example, when I was a child, I would visit my grandmother every Sunday. In college, we would stay up all night talking. Every summer, we would go to the beach for 2 weeks. My father would always tell us stories before bed. How is this different from using used to? Great question. Both describe past habits, but there's a subtle difference. Used to simply states the habit. I used to visit my grandmother. Would adds more nostalgia, more emotion, more vivid memory. I would visit my grandmother and we would bake cookies together and she would tell me stories about her childhood. Would is better for storytelling and creating atmosphere. Also, used to can describe states, I used to be shy, but would only describes actions, I would act shy, sounds less natural. That's a beautiful distinction. Now let's talk about something crucial for professional English, softening your opinions and statements. How do you use would for this? This is where would becomes incredibly powerful for professional communication. Instead of direct statements, you soften them. That's wrong becomes, I would say that's not quite accurate. You should do this becomes, I would recommend doing this. This won't work becomes, I wouldn't expect that to work. That's a bad idea becomes, I wouldn't advise that approach. Why is this softening so important? Because in professional environments, being too direct can damage relationships or sound arrogant. When you soften your statements with would, you sound more thoughtful, more diplomatic, more open to other perspectives. It shows emotional intelligence. You're not commanding or criticizing, you're offering your perspective politely. People are much more likely to listen to you and respect your opinion when you express it this way. Can you give a complete workplace example? Absolutely. Imagine someone proposes an idea in a meeting that you think has problems. Instead of saying, that won't work because of these issues, which sounds negative and dismissive, you could say, that's an interesting approach, however, I would be concerned about a few potential challenges. I would suggest we also consider how this might impact our timeline, and I would recommend discussing the budget implications before we move forward. See how much more professional and collaborative that sounds? That's incredibly valuable. Now let's discuss giving advice with would. How is this different from using should? Should is direct advice or obligation. You should see a doctor means I'm telling you what to do. Would is softer, more like a suggestion. I would see a doctor if I were you. Gives advice but sounds less pushy. I would recommend seeing a doctor, sounds professional. The general pattern is I would verb or I would recommend verb ing or if I were you, I would verb. Can you give examples in different situations? Sure. To a friend, if I were you, I'd talk to her honestly about how you feel. To a colleague, I would recommend getting that in writing before you proceed. To someone asking for restaurant suggestions, I'd try the Italian place on Main Street. It's excellent. To someone with a problem, I wouldn't worry too much about it. These things usually work themselves out. Each uses would to give advice that sounds helpful, not bossy. Excellent. Now let's reveal another powerful use, would in polite disagreement. How do you disagree without sounding rude? This is crucial for maintaining good relationships. Instead of no, that's wrong, or I disagree, you use would to create diplomatic disagreement. I would see it differently. I wouldn't quite agree with that. I would argue that there's another perspective. I wouldn't say that's entirely accurate. I would interpret that data differently. Can you show how to disagree completely while still being polite? Yes. Imagine someone says something you completely disagree with. Instead of blunt disagreement, you could say, "That's an interesting perspective, though I would come to a different conclusion. Based on my experience, I would say that this, based on my experience, I would say that this is more likely. However, I would certainly be interested to hear more about what led you to your view. You've disagreed completely, but you've been respectful and opened the door for dialogue." That's masterful. Now let's talk about something subtle but important: would in polite statements. How do you use this? Sometimes you make statements softer by adding would. Compare "that seems expensive" versus "that would seem expensive." "This takes about an hour" versus "this would take about an hour." "I think you're right" versus "I would think you're right." The would versions sound more tentative, more polite, less absolute. You're not stating facts forcefully, you're offering observations gently. When should you use this technique? Use it when you want to sound less certain or less direct, especially if you might be wrong or if you're in a formal situation. "I think the meeting is at 3 p.m." sounds certain. "I would think the meeting is at 3 p.m." sounds you're fairly sure but not 100% sure. "That seems like a good approach" is direct. "That would seem like a good approach" is more tentative and polite. Now let's talk about would in reported speech. What happens when you're telling someone what another person said?
When you report what someone said, will often changes to would. For example, she said, "I will come tomorrow" becomes "she said she would come tomorrow." He promised, "I will help you" becomes "he promised he would help me." They announced, "We will launch in June" becomes "they announced they would launch in June."
Why does this change happen?
It's because you're shifting the time perspective. When the person originally spoke, tomorrow was future from their point of view, so they used will. But when you're reporting it later, that future is now in the past relative to when they spoke, so it becomes would. It's like taking a step back in time. The would creates that distance.
That's clear. Now let's discuss pronunciation. This is where many learners sound unnatural. How do native speakers really pronounce would?
First, remember that would is almost always contracted in speech. I would equals I'd, you would equals you'd, she would equals she'd, we would equals we'd, they would equals they'd. Second, would you in fast speech sounds like woulda or woulda. Would you like coffee sounds like would you like coffee. Third, would have contracts to would've, which sounds like woulda in casual speech. I would have gone sounds like I woulda gone.
Can you demonstrate with a sentence showing multiple contractions?
Sure. Written, if I had known you would be there, I would have come earlier and we would have had more time to talk. Spoken naturally, if I'd known you'd be there, I would have come earlier and we'd have had more time to talk. Even more casual, if I'd known you'd be there, I would have come earlier and we'd have had more time to talk. That last one is very casual, but you need to recognize it in movies and conversations.
Those reductions are so important for listening comprehension. Now let's talk about common expressions and phrases with would. What are some fixed expressions?
There are many. I would imagine she's already left. I would think they'd be here by now. I would hope we can resolve this quickly. I would expect better service. I would guess it costs about $50. Would you believe she's 60 years old?
What about would with rather?
Would rather is super common for expressing preferences. Structure, would rather plus base verb. Examples, I'd rather stay home. She'd rather walk than take the bus. We'd rather not discuss this now. They'd rather you called first. Negative, I'd rather not, is a polite way to decline. Would you like to come? I'd rather not, but thank you.
What about would in polite phrases for uncertain situations?
Yes, native speakers use that would be nice, responding to a suggestion, that would work, agreeing to a plan, that would be helpful, accepting an offer, that would be wonderful, enthusiastic agreement, that would be perfect, strong agreement, that would make sense, agreeing with logic.
Now let's discuss common mistakes. What's the biggest error learners make with would?
The biggest mistake is using would when they should use simple present or will. For example, saying, I would go to work every day, when they mean, I go to work every day. Would for past habits is correct, like, I would go to work every day when I lived in London. But for current routines, use simple present. Another mistake, if I will have money, I would travel. Incorrect. The correct form is, if I had money, I would travel, or if I have money, I will travel.
What about mixing up would, could, and should?
This is huge. Remember, would equals hypothetical or preference, like I would love to go equals I want to go given the chance. Could equals ability or possibility. I could go equals I'm able to go, it's possible. Should equals obligation or advice. I should go equals I have an obligation to go, it's the right thing to do. They're completely different. I would eat healthier equals preference. I could eat healthier equals ability. I should eat healthier equals obligation.
Can you give a situation showing all three used correctly?
Perfect example. Imagine someone offers you cake. Would you like some cake? You could respond, I would love some. Preference, you want it. Or, I could have a small piece. Ability, you're able to eat it. Or, I shouldn't, I'm trying to eat healthier. Obligation, you think it's not right for you. Three completely different meanings.
Excellent. Now let's discuss the would technique for professional emails. How do you use would in written communication?
Would makes emails more polite and professional. Instead of, I want to request a meeting, write, I would like to request a meeting. Instead of, please send me the file, write, would you be able to send me the file? Instead of, I think we should change this, write, I would suggest changing this. Instead of, this doesn't work, write, I'm afraid this wouldn't work for our needs.
Can you show a complete professional email using would effectively?
Absolutely. Dear Ms. Johnson, I would like to follow up on our conversation from yesterday. I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss the project timeline in more detail. Would it be possible to schedule a meeting next week? I would be available Monday or Wednesday afternoon, though I could be flexible if another time would work better for you. I would also like to thank you for your helpful feedback on the proposal. Please let me know what would work best for your schedule. I would be happy to accommodate your preferences. Best regards.
That's so professional. Notice how would appears multiple times but doesn't sound repetitive because it's used in different ways. Now let's talk about cultural aspects. Why is would so important in English-speaking cultures?
In English-speaking cultures, especially British, Canadian, and Australian cultures, indirect communication and politeness are highly valued. Being too direct can be seen as rude, pushy, or aggressive. Would allows you to express your needs and opinions while maintaining this cultural expectation of politeness. It shows respect for the other person's autonomy. You're not commanding them, you're making a polite request they can refuse.
How does this compare to other languages and cultures?
Many languages and cultures value directness. They see it as honest and efficient. In those cultures, saying, I want coffee is perfectly polite. But in English, especially in professional or formal situations, this can sound demanding. Learning to use would isn't just about grammar, it's about cultural adaptation. When you use would appropriately, you're showing cultural intelligence and making native speakers feel more comfortable with you.
That's such an important point. Now let's discuss the special technique we promised. How can learners choose correctly between would, could, and should every time?
Here's the technique. Ask yourself what you're really trying to express. Ask, is this about what I want or imagine? Use would. Is this about what's possible or what I'm able to do? Use could. Is this about what's obligatory or what I think is right? Use should. This simple question helps you choose correctly every time.
Can you give examples showing this technique in action?
Sure. Situation, someone invites you somewhere, but you're not sure. Think about what you want to express. Want, imagine. I would love to come. Preference. Possible, able. I could come if I finish work early. Possibility. Obligatory, right. I should probably stay home and rest. Obligation. Same situation, 3 different responses based on what you're really trying to say.
That's brilliant. Now let's discuss advanced uses. How do native speakers use would in storytelling?
Wood is powerful in storytelling for describing characteristic behaviors and creating vivid scenes. My grandfather was an interesting man. Every morning he would wake up at 5 a.m. and would go for a long walk. He would stop at the same cafe where the owner would already have his coffee ready. They would chat for a few minutes and then my grandfather would continue his walk. When he returned home, he would sit in his favorite chair and would read the newspaper cover to cover. See how wood creates rhythm and brings the story to life?
That's beautiful. The wood makes it feel like we're watching it happen. Now, John, let me ask you personally, what's your relationship with wood? How do you use it in your daily life?
Thanks for asking, Maya. Honestly, I use would constantly without even thinking about it because it's so ingrained in natural English. I use it to be polite. Would you mind if I open the window? I use it to express preferences. I'd rather have tea than coffee. I use it to imagine. I would love to visit Iceland someday. I use it to soften my opinions in meetings. I would suggest we consider other options. I probably use it 50 times a day. It's become automatic. What about you?
I absolutely agree. Would is everywhere in my speech, too. I especially notice how much I use it for politeness. Just today, I said, "Would you be able to send me that file? I'd appreciate if you could reply by Friday." And, "Would it be possible to reschedule?" I also use it a lot for hypotheticals when planning. That would be perfect. That would work well. That wouldn't be ideal. It's so versatile. I think once learners start noticing would in native speech, they'll be amazed at how frequently we use it.
Absolutely. And that's actually great advice for our viewers. Start noticing wood in movies, TV shows, podcasts, and real conversations. You'll hear it constantly, and you'll start to internalize the natural patterns.
Exactly. Now we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, which use of would do you find most challenging? Is it the hypothetical conditionals, the polite requests, the past habits? Share your experiences with our community. Your questions help us create better lessons.
And try creating your own sentences using would. Practice making polite requests, expressing preferences, or describing past habits. Share them in the comments and we'll give you feedback. This is your safe space to practice and learn.
If this video helped you understand would better and feel more confident using it, please give us a thumbs up. It truly helps us know that this content is valuable to you and motivates us to create more lessons like this.
Please share this video with anyone learning English who wants to sound more polite, more sophisticated, and more like a native speaker. Would is one of those game-changing words that truly transforms your English.
Subscribe to English Speaking Nerds if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly lessons. We're here to help you master the English that native speakers actually use in real life.
Until next time, stay nerdy, stay curious, and remember that mastering small words like would can make a massive difference in how you communicate and how others perceive you in English.
Thank you for being part of our learning community.
Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep using would to make your English more polite and professional.
We can't wait to read your would sentences in the comments.
See you in the next episode.
Stay confident. Bye.
Take care, everyone.